Today we're going to be talking about tire size on a hardtail. There's a million of these videos out here and I'm hesitant to do another one, but I still get this question almost every day. What's the best tire size on a hardtail? The correct answer to that question, and almost every other question people ask me, is it depends. In some cases, I like the Plus better, and in some cases, I like the 29 better. It really depends. So let's talk about when you would want each one. And really, these tires are more similar than they are different. It's a 3/4 inch difference in radius. It's 3/4 of an inch from the center of your axle to the top difference. So in my opinion, 29ers are faster, and once you get up to speed, they hold that speed a little bit better. For me, 27.5s are more fun. They offer more cushion in the Plus. They're less awkward on slow technical obstacles, which I like. To me, they're easier to jump. It's easier to move around. Now, I'm a small person. Someone who's 6'2" may feel like these are too small and 29ers are the way to go. But let's dive into this a little bit deeper. A lot of people say 29ers roll over stuff easier, and they do, but barely, like 1 or 2% to me. I know people will disagree and say you feel a world of a difference between 29er and 27.5. Like I said, it's that much taller. They're more similar than they are dissimilar. If you're riding mellow trails and it's flowy stuff and there's not a whole lot of chunk and there's not a lot of momentum stoppers, 29ers are a pretty good option, especially for a hardtail. But I always recommend going wide tires on hardtails unless it's like super smooth with no bumps. Because on a hardtail we don't have rear suspension. And the more tire we have on our rim, the more we can air it down and turn our tire into a suspension device where it absorbs the harsh impacts and the rocks and keeps you in control and keeps you on line. So for that reason, I actually prefer Plus tires. I am running both on my hardtail. When I'm with my friends that are super fast on their full suspensions and I want to keep up, I take the 29er. It's a little bit less fun. It's a little bit more awkward in challenging slow terrain and punchy climbs and trials moves, but it's a little bit faster on the flats and the rollings and even the downs. When I'm not trying to keep up with my buddies who are on full suspensions who are really fast, I'm having more fun on the Plus tires. It feels just like a little dirt jumper with those. It's, like I said, it's not a huge difference because it's only 3/4 of an inch taller, so they still roll over things just fine, but I can air them down to get this suspension feel on the trail. And where I live, it's rocky, it's loose, it's chunky, it's hard to ride on a hardtail, and so any little bit of extra traction I can get or extra comfort goes a long way. We know how important a supple frame is, but your wheels can actually play a huge part in that too. I'll do another video on wheels in the future, but the only carbon wheels I like on a hardtail that don't beat me up are the Zip 30 Motos and the Night wheels. Those are the only two. Everything else, these Noxes are fantastic wheels, but they're way too stiff, and I feel every little vibration, even on my titanium hardtail that's supple. These transfer a ton of vibration to my body. I love them on my full suspension enduro bike. They work fantastic. And on a full suspension, you can have a stiff wheel because the suspension takes that harshness out. On a hardtail, I don't think it's good to have a stiff wheel, especially if it's rocky, bouncy, chunky terrain. So let's talk about these one by one. 29 by 235. This is a fantastic size for keeping it light, keeping it zippy. XC racers, if I raced XC, I'd do 29 all the time. Most XC tracks aren't real bumpy, they're not real choppy, they're pretty flowy, and you keep a pretty good speed the whole time. You never get down to these super slow, punchy moves like we have here in Sedona. You're always kind of flowing along at least at 5 miles an hour, and I think the 235s do really well on that. This is a 25 mil internal rim, which is quite narrow, but it works really well with this 235 tire. So for XC, flowy, flat stuff with lots of climbs and not super aggressive downs with really technical terrain, 29 by 235 gets my vote. This is my Assegai 29 by 2.5. I love this tire with this rim combo, but it's not quite as smooth as my Plus tires. I do feel like the little bit narrower tires versus the Plus roll a little bit faster. So this is like a good hard charging 29er setup for me. If I were racing enduro, man, that'd be a tough decision between the Plus or the 29. I'd probably be a little bit faster on this, so I'd probably run this. You know, at 2.5 inches wide, a 3.0 you can run a lot softer and take more of the bumps and keep your momentum that way. So you can either keep your momentum by having a bigger wheel that rolls a little bit better, or you can have it by something that has a little suspension built in that doesn't stop when it hits bumps. So you need to decide what's best for your trails. I've been riding this primarily for the last 4 months, and I really like it in combination with these Zip wheels. The Zip wheels have this ankle compliance built in, so when you hit a bump, they're able to deflect on the rock without feeling squirmy. I don't know how else to describe it, but they're a very compliant wheel, a very comfortable wheel that doesn't beat you up. These are my 2.6s on my Nox rims. These are 36 mil internal width, so they're nice and wide. And you'd think there wouldn't be a huge difference between 2.6 and 2.8, but there is to me. If you were living in a really smooth place and you had a lot of jump parks and you had a lot of flow trails and there wasn't a whole lot of just down the trail, just chattery stuff, I'd probably go with a 2.4 in the back and run a narrow 27.5. It's going to be light, it's going to accelerate quicker, and it's going to feel a little bit smaller, a little bit more like a dirt jumper when you're in the air and jumping. And that's what I would go with. It's got a lot more cushion than a 2.4, so if your frame can't fit a 2.8, a 2.6 might be good for you. If you're in chunky terrain like me and it's loose and it's rocky and you need to use your tire as a suspension device, a 2.8, which is in between these, that's usually what I run on the rear of my Plus bikes, a 2.8 would be a great option. 2.8s you can run pretty low. If you've got a wide rim, they fill out really nicely. A lot of frames have clearance for 2.8s these days, and you can get a really good ride that doesn't feel squirmy but still absorbs a lot of those bumps. So if I'm charging 100% as fast as possible, 29 by 2.5. If I'm goofing off with my friends, finding stuff to jump off of and try alternate lines and make really tough stuff, and like we typically do on Hardtail Party, 27.5 by 3.0 or 2.8. And I typically prefer a wider tire in the front than the back. I feel like it tracks a little bit better, and I need more traction in the front than in the back, especially on corners. And so a wider tire typically gives me more traction in the corners. I know a lot of people are starting to run Plus in the back and 29 in the front. I've done that, and it's not bad, but it feels a little bit off, more for the width of the tire than the height of the tire. Having a really wide rear tire, it doesn't, like the narrower tires carve a little bit better and change direction a little bit better, and you can rail stuff better, and the wider ones are willing to do it, but they just kind of follow along. And so I feel like having a narrow front and a wide rear makes the front grab really good and the back just kind of tracks along. It's hard to carve the back for me with those setups. So what's best for you? It really depends. The chunkier your terrain, the more I'm going to recommend a Plus setup. A hardtail with Plus tires front and rear with wide rims and low pressure is super fun. It's just maximum fun. A 29er setup with good downhill tires is really fast. But in technical climbs and technical descents and wheelies and jumps and stuff like that, I prefer the smaller wheel. I feel like it's out of the way a little bit more. I feel like I can throw the bike around a little more. But in the end, it's 3/4 of an inch. It's not that different. If I had to be stuck with either 29ers all the time or 27.5 plus, it'd be 25 plus every single time. I love it. It's a little bit heavier, a little bit slower, a little bit more rolling resistance, but a lot more fun to me. And I get my fun out of sessioning things, trying technical things, slow moves, goofing off. That's more fun to me than shaving off a second on a downhill. If you get your fun out of the fastest maximum speed and you want to beat your buddies, 29er is going to be a little bit faster. The bummer about as wheels get bigger is the chainstays need to get longer. As chainstays get longer, bikes feel more planted. They feel more stuck to the ground. You can bomb through crazy stuff way faster. For racing, it's fantastic. For learning how to manual and bunny hop and lift up crazy stuff and try all these wheelies and technical stuff, a shorter chainstay is way easier. and that's why I ride. That's why this channel's called Hardtail Party, not Hardtail Racer. I don't care how fast I'm going. I'm just here to have a party with my friends on the trail, and shorter chainstays, smaller wheels, and more playful geometry makes that possible. I'm kind of sad that almost every plus bike these days are coming with 29ers on them, because I feel like, man, I feel like 27.5 Plus gets a bad rap, and the reviewers hate them, and they talk about how bad they are, and there's this stigma that if you ride them, you must be a beginner, or you must be lame, or you must be out of touch, and anyone who knows anything about bikes is riding 29ers these days, and I completely disagree. We're all riding bikes, we're all having fun, we're not curing cancer here, we're getting out on the weekends and playing in the mountains, and changing your tire size by 3/4 of an inch is not going to be what matters as much as the right tire tread, the right tire width, the right wheel setup. All that is way more important than whether it's 3/4 of an inch bigger or 3/4 of an inch smaller. Wait, I was just packing up and I remember there was something else I wanted to say. For bike packing, I always like plus tires, 27.5 Plus. I like 29 Plus as well. Every Trek Stash I've ridden, I've liked that feel. For adventure and exploring and putting down lots of miles with a loaded bike, really like both of those formats. And with all of these tires, rim width matters a ton. You don't want a really narrow rim with a really balloony tire, because when you go around corners, it's going to want to twist on that narrow rim. If you widen that out, it's not going to be able to twist as much. For trail riding, I like 27.5 by 2.8 in the rear, and 27.5 by 2.8 or even 3.0 in the front with an aggressive tread, like a downhill tire. It's going to have a stiffer sidewall, so it's not going to flex as much. It's not going to feel squirmy in the corners, but I'm still going to be able to run at a low pressure to take some of the sting out and improve my traction. Even the roadies these days are lowering their tire pressure and finding that they're faster because it doesn't transmit vibrations as much, and for some reason the rolling resistance is not actually slower, which is crazy. Another thing we need to talk about as well is tire casing. There's 60 TPI and 120 TPI. A lot of people don't look at this. They just buy a tire, see what name's written on the side, and make assumptions about it. TPI stands for threads per inch. So the tires are actually made out of fabric that are coated in rubber and other materials. In the 60 TPI, there's 60 threads for every inch, and they're big threads, and it's stiffer. The 120 threads per inch, 120 TPI, are smaller threads with more of them in it. They're lighter, they're more supple, and they're often called supple casing or for a supple ride. And what that means is at the same PSI for both tires, the 120 TPI tire is going to be a lot softer. It's going to squish more, it's going to flex a little more in the corners, and the 60 TPI is going to feel more rigid and not squirm as much. So for trail stuff, I run 2.8 60 TPI tires. They're a little bit heavier, they're a lot stiffer sidewall. I run those on about a 35 mil rim. For bike packing, I run 3.0s on a 120 TPI on like a 45 mil rim, super wide rim, and that allows me to get that nice profile and air them down good without them feeling squirmy, even on a 120 TPI casing. I know that's a lot of information, but a lot of you guys out there are tech nerds like me, and you geek out on this stuff, and that really does make a big difference. So when shopping for tires, look at that TPI rating on the side, and yeah, pick the right tread for your terrain. I like less aggressive stuff for bike packing, where I'm doing 40, 50 miles a day. It just rolls a little bit better. I'm not slashing corners. I'm not bombing down stuff as fast as possible. I'm pacing myself across the space of the day. So a little bit faster rolling tire with a little bit less knobbies and a little bit less weight makes a lot of sense. Anyway, thanks for geeking out with me. I love talking about stuff like this. Keep the good questions coming. Those are what feed my decision on what to make next in the next video. Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.